welcome to another Gospel Entrepreneurs in partnership with UCB. And I'm thrilled that Charlie's going to be joining us, who was an investment banker, worked in the city. He's got an amazing story, but the takeaway for this is how to stand up for your faith in difficult environments and see God honor you because you honor him. So sit back and enjoy. Charlie, your surname is a bit of a challenge to me. So give us your surname, Charlie, because I'd hate to pronounce it wrong.
I don't think you could do any worse than myriads of people all over the place. It's actually a Gaelic name. So correctly pronounced in Scotland, it's Arbuthnot. But down here, Arbuthnot does well, and that's anglicised, but we've been called many things.
I'm sure you have, because its spelling doesn't always come across in the way you would say it and all of that. So I'm sure you had that all your life, Charlie. Just a brief bit about you, Charlie. I know you went to Cambridge, you're married, you've got children. Just give us a little bit of a background and where you're living in the UK. That would be great.
So yes, school and university education, got a degree. I always say the letters after my degree are brackets just because it was very close, but I did get it. I spent most of my time on the river instead of in the science labs, but that's a wholly different story. Married to Jenny, 3 children, all married, 7 grandchildren, living in West Sussex. Having been in London for actually all of our married life, we moved down here in 2018. So we've been down here for 8 years, but we knew the area well anyway, so wanted to come down here and be part of what God is doing down here.
You stepped right out of university, my understanding, is into a bank setting and went into finance. How did that come about? And what did you start off doing in that space?
I had no idea what I wanted to do. I did a natural sciences degree at Cambridge. As I say, I just got it, but not good enough really to let me go on with any scientific research or anything like that. So I needed to change tack. I had no idea what to do. My dad said to me, if you don't know what to do, why don't you use the interview process as your opportunity to interview the different types of business you might work for? So I applied to the top business in every different sector I could think of. And only rather further down the track when I started getting rejection letters did I realize, hang on, if I've only replied to the top business in every sector, I'm probably not going to get a job. Anyway, I did get offered jobs by 2 insurance companies and 1 investment bank. And then I had a dilemma because the insurance company both of them would be more like a 9 to 5. I was clearly at the top of the intake, so it was going to be safe. And I would have lots of time outside of work to pursue what I felt God was calling me to do. On the other hand, in the investment bank, I was definitely at the bottom of the intake. I was at one of, probably the elite investment bank of that time in London. I was astonished I got a place. I was always going to be, trying to catch up with the clever people who were part of my cohort. So I was just sort of praying, Lord, what should I do? I could not get my head around what I should do. And in the end, and this is not advice I would particularly suggest to anybody to do, I said, actually, Lord, I'm completely stumped. Can you have somebody come up to me and tell me what I need to do? And that evening, I was out with a bunch of Christian friends, and one of them, a chap called Richard Tulloch, lovely, lovely chap, walked up to me and said, have you accepted that job with Warburgs yet? And if not, you should. And I said, Richard, you're an answer to prayer. This is amazing. Just going to tell you what I've prayed. And he, of course, went in complete panic that he quite inadvertently was now directing somebody's career. And I said, no, God's way bigger than that. Don't worry about this. This is not on you at all. This is a direct answer to prayer. I then rang my parents and said, look, this has just happened. And they went, oh, we're so glad. We're so sure that is the right job, but we didn't want to interfere. So by the end of that evening, I went, okay, this is all very clear. So that, bizarrely, believe it or not, is how I got into investment banking. Now, probably worth saying at that point that my plan was to be in the secular world for about 5 years. My dad had gone into the church late in life, and he was very conscious that the ministers he was serving under had no experience of some of the toughest things the congregational members were grappling with, mainly, how do I buy a house and how do I finance a mortgage? Because they hadn't had to. They'd gone out of uni, into ordination college, into the church, they'd had a vicarage. I remember him coming home one evening saying, it's absolutely crucial. If you ever go into the church, you have to get buried in secular society first to understand what are the pressure points And when you've got a bit of a handle on what are the stress points for the average man in the street, by all means then turn your collar around, go into the church and do that bit. But do find out how the world works first. So that was my plan. 5 years in investment banking or whatever, then into ordained minister in the Church of England. And we can talk about this if you'd like to, but then I was sent out to New York for a year to set up a rep office out there. And then there was this really clear call of God, no, you're meant to be in business. And I then, of course, panicked, went, but I haven't been concentrating. I've been keeping my head above water just to survive 5 years. If I'm meant to have a career in business, I've actually really got to do some pretty serious catching up. So I jumped out of that elite bank into a bank that at that stage was much further down the pecking order. I was therefore correspondingly brighter and then worked my way through that. And actually that bank then became an elite bank in various areas. And I happened to be involved in them, which was great.
And isn't it amazing, Charlie? I think so many people really think that if they're serving Jesus, in the end, you have to go full time, because there's this view that if you're kind of in a secular space, quote unquote, being salt and light, that's kind of a lesser calling. Is that what you were living with, do you think?
No, I just had a passion to be in the church. And certainly now my view is completely different. I think the body of Christ model in 1 Corinthians 12 is absolutely crucial. And we're called, if we each do our bit well, God is clever enough to make it all fit together. And if I try to do your bit, firstly, I won't do it well as you would do it. And secondly, I'll rob you of your calling. So it's absolutely crucial that I keep out of your patch and I do just the piece God is calling me to do. I think that's how I see it now. And I was actually doing a strategy day for a charity a couple of days ago, and they're an incredible charity. And there's a million needs all around them that all absolutely fit with what they're doing. But part of what we were trying to do was grapple with, yes, but what is your calling in this charity? Trust God to sort the rest of it out. You do your bit excellently in the power of his Spirit. So that's the thing and we need Christians in the investment banks. We really, really do.
Exactly. So let's go back to that. You moved into an investment bank. You're a follower of Jesus. Some people look at their methods and style and what they do and how they operate. It's not exactly totally Christian, quote unquote. How did you live in that space as a kind of Christian follower of Jesus? And I'm sure you had some massive challenges in that space.
There were certainly challenges. Yes, there's some incredible people there, but no, the environment is not a godly environment. And there were some, let's say, less incredible people there as well. So there were certainly challenges. I went in with a really clear vision, and I think I made one major tactical error, which I would want to put out to anybody starting out in any career, actually. My goal was that in Warburg, which was the investment bank I was started off in, the graduate training program was going to send us around each department for 6 months. And then after a couple of years, you decide where you're going to settle. So my strategy was really simple. Win one person for Christ in each department, leave them to win the rest when I move on. But what I didn't do was have people around me to pray for me, to fuel me, to encourage me. Warburg was a 24/7 work your socks off machine. And my drive got dulled. My love for God didn't change, but I just got exhausted. And that drive went. Contrast that with my year in New York. The person who led our home group was a doorman on a building in Spanish Harlem. He wasn't the brightest theologian, but my goodness me, he was a pastor. Every Tuesday evening, I arrived back in that group. They were chuffed to bits to have a Wall Street banker in their home group. And he came up to me, actually, no, the minister came up to me quite early on and said, I want you to understand, Charlie, I will never ask you to play any role in this church at all. I want you to understand why. It is because we want to resource you to be Jesus on Wall Street. So what happened every Tuesday evening, I came back, they loved me, they looked after me, they listened to me, they prayed for me, they recommissioned me, they sent me back onto Wall Street to go and live for God there. That's what I didn't set up back here. So that would be my key thing I would be saying to people. We can't do this on our own. We're part of the body. Let's partner with other people who get it. And actually partner with older folk, people who've been around the block, who've learned the hard way, who've got it wrong. I say to people, can't necessarily tell you how to do things right. I can certainly tell you a million ways to do things wrong because I've done them all and I've learned.
That's great though, Charlie, that somebody recognised that your calling is to be in that bank, and how can we serve you and support you? Because often churches think, oh, we've got a banker, we'll make them the treasurer, we'll expect them at all the home group meetings and all of that, not realising their demands on their role is far greater, and they can be salt and light in that space. How can we pray? So that was a real helpful piece that you got in New York. Obviously, it didn't happen when you got back in London, but the recognition of it, I'm sure, was significant in your life.
I think it shaped the whole way I see church. Yes. If we are the body, we each do our piece, do it really well. We all encourage each other to do the piece we're called to do. Because the risk otherwise is a lot of people, when they get to my age, for listeners who can't see me and make a guess at it, I'm just short of 70. A lot of people, they've actually lost their dream because they've only been valued in church for what they can do in the evenings and the weekends. So their dream of transforming the media industry, transforming the banking industry, transforming this after the other industry has actually been crushed. Now, contrast that with the curate at a church I was in, St. Mark's Battersea Rise, when we were in London. Lovely, lovely man, David Lally, who may well be listening to this, I don't know. He made a point of coming up to the city every 4 to 6 weeks and taking me out to lunch and just hearing, how are you doing? And I would come down the escalators out of then Royal Bank Canada, and I would get to the bottom and he'd say, Charlie, as you were coming down, this is what God showed me about you. So he also then really got it, but we're 20 years further on from that. So I wish I'd started out by drawing on older folk and saying, you've been in this space, how do I do this well? I think I was independent. I think I thought I could do it, and I've learned the hard way. No, I'm part of the body.
And being part of the body, you were in that space, obviously, because when you walk into some of those meetings, you've got the spirit in you. There may be some decisions being made and you're not certain about. And some of those conflicts that the entrepreneur feels, particularly when they're in a successful environment where sometimes decisions are made that we wouldn't necessarily go along with. You must have walked into some of those environments, Charlie.
I did. And I think the really helpful thing for me was to have my colours nailed to the mast right on the outset. So it wasn't a matter of getting in a difficult situation and having to say, actually, I can't do this because this is what I believe. Or both. I did get in a muddle because I wasn't as clear, and I had a big showdown when I was told, this is a major deal. You have to come in on Sunday and work. And I went, actually, no, I don't work on Sundays. That Sunday's not for working. And I was told, no. There's sometimes when you have to sacrifice all your principles, including your religious ones. And I said, no, I don't think you actually understand what I'm saying. I'm actually saying no. And then I discovered the reason we weren't doing this work on Saturday was the director I was working under, he needed to go shooting and he couldn't cancel that. So I stuck to my guns and I didn't have to come in on Sunday, which was great. And then I went off to see Chariots of Fire, which had just been released. And I went, yeah, I got that one right. So when I moved from that to Humbrose, in my interview, I said, look, I want to be really clear on one thing. And that is, don't want to work on Sundays. And I'd like to put that on the table right now. If that's a problem for you, please don't offer me the job. And my boss then, we probably talked about it for about 30 seconds, maybe 1 minute. And he just said, totally not an issue at all. Absolutely respect that. That's fine. 5 years later, we're in the middle of one of the biggest corporate takeovers in UK history. And it's being financed with a particular financial instrument where I was the team leader. So I'm an integral part of the financing of this huge deal. And I was taking the view, well, at that point, you're part of a team and, I have a very clear principle, but there's times when you lay that down. This is a time when the right thing to do is to say, no, I'm part of a team. I'm cracking on. Anyway, we're sitting in the middle of this room, about 30 people around the table, everybody's shipping in their phone numbers and everything for how they can be contacted on Saturdays and Sundays through this weekend. It's a Friday evening. My boss is on my right. They get to him first. He says, here's my phone number for Saturday, and here's the phone number for Sunday. Here's Charlie's phone number for Saturday. He's not available on Sunday. He'd remembered. Really impressive. So that was a bit of that. But I think what it did was I had a little tiny lapel cross. I'm not a great fan of the big ostentatious ones, but this was a very small one. But what it did was everybody asked, what's that for? So you got endless conversations, which is wonderful, about faith. It meant my colours were nailed to the mast really quickly. And it was then terribly easy, actually, to say, sorry, that didn't work for me. I remember one deal with a company actually in New Zealand, and they weren't in the meeting at this point, and we were sorting out the expenses, and there was something lobbed into the expenses of this deal, which had nothing to do with that deal at all. It was a particular asset that the department quite wanted to have. And I went, no, sorry, no, they're not paying for that. And I was told, yes, they are. And I said, no, that's not honest. We're not doing that. And I was told, basically, we are doing that. And if you don't like it, go. So I said, that's very easy. I said, I will never have anything further to do with this client in the rest of my career. And I left the room. The result of that, of course, which was quite funny, we were in one meeting, I've forgotten who the client was. My boss and I were sitting there and he was presenting something, and he was very good at reading people. And he could read that this client was just sitting there going, do I trust this man? So he looked at him and he said, I know, you're wondering whether you can trust me. And the answer is no, you can't. I have Charlie next to me and he is my conscience. He is your guarantee that I will not lie to you.
Wow.
Wow. Thank you, Lord. That's amazing.
But you had to confront certain things and be part of that to actually establish that credibility. And obviously there's a lot of pressure in that environment that you could have compromised, but you didn't, Charlie. How do we build that into people listening to this, younger gospel entrepreneurs? You obviously did it. Now, there were seasons where you didn't, but in the second season, you really did say, this is who I am. I'm a follower of Jesus. How would you help people in that environment? Because it must have been a bit challenging for you. Everybody's in the room. You're the one challenging it.
Yes. A fun little story was we were going to do a deal financing a chain of pubs, which I was comfortable doing, didn't mind doing that. But we were financing a business that had just taken over a smaller pub chain with 2 strip clubs in it. They were very clear, our finance is going to the pub business, they're selling the strip clubs. So I had an opportunity just to go, well, it's all right then. Except that we were reading with the children that book, In His Steps, from which the What Would Jesus Do came. And I knew I couldn't do it. But I was leading the team. I was leading the sales, the institutional investor sales team. So I was the one strategizing, how do we get this deal sold? But I went to my boss and I said, look, I'm really sorry, but I can't do this deal. And he said to me, again, really respected me. He said, okay, I totally hear what you're saying. I'll take you off this deal. What I need though is I need you to brief your number 2 on every one of your clients so he can speak to all of your clients to sell the deal. I went, fine, I'll do that. Yeah. And I got a call from the head of sales at UBS saying, good on you, Charlie. Well done. Because he'd heard that I was not prepared to be involved in this. He was a Christian. He was so impressed that somebody could take a stand. And so part of standing was actually knowing some of the other Christians in the sector and making sure we talked to each other. One of my key investors at Prudential was a Christian. There was a wonderful man who headed up the investment side of the bit that I did at Sun Life of Canada. He was a very strong Christian. And so I would be meeting with these people. And I think this is such a key thing. It's really hard to hold your ground on your own. But when you're in fellowship with other people, in that case, in the same place, I have a wife who is utterly brilliant at supporting me on this. She would far rather I stood for Christ and got fired than that I caved in and kept a job and kept the income. If that meant being fired, she'd go, yes, because you've stood your ground for Christ. So that is phenomenal. I mean, strong wife, godly wife, really important.
You obviously married well, Charlie. So we're coming into land and obviously you've been very entrepreneurial at the highest level, big investment, big companies. But people listening to that or this maybe think, well, I don't live in that space. But the principle and values, which is what you're bringing, is what they need to embrace in whatever area of business or entrepreneurship they're doing, isn't it?
I think that's absolutely right. And to give you an example on that, again, my lovely wife said, you need to be working a 4-day week. I said, Jenny, I'm on the trading floor of a big investment bank. You can't do 4 days a week. Anyway, if we're coming into land, I'll miss the story, but I ended up doing actually a 9-day fortnight rather than a 4-day week. So 1 day off every 2 weeks, given to me for no salary sacrifice at all. I mean, it was quite extraordinary what happened. But yes, actually just on the way to where I'm going, extraordinarily, I've found that every single time we've taken a clear stand, I say we, because it's always Jenny with me, we've taken a clear stand for a kingdom principle. It's been followed either by a promotion or a pay rise or both.
Wow.
When several of them have been career killer decisions. except it's gone the other way. So that's important. But I was talking with a friend who runs a small research company called Ida Research. They research Christian charities to help them actually see whether they are delivering what they claim they're delivering. That brilliant little company. And he just heard that story and he said, right, I'm putting all my staff on a 4-day week. That's a very small business. It was a very small startup business. That was really risky. But he chose to invest in his staff and he saw, no, that's the right way to see my staff flourish. And that business has just gone from strength to strength. It's really, really good. And with some major contracts from very big ticket Christian charities and things. So it does apply across the board. I think the whole of life, doesn't it, in the end, just boils down to knowing who our Father is. If I think my job is my provider, then I've got to be very careful to play my cards right to keep my job. If I believe that Jehovah Jireh is my provider, my job is simply his current means of providing, then I don't need to worry, because if I get thrown out of this one, he will open a door to something else. And I think if we can have the sort of the big God understanding, which clearly is Genesis to Revelation through and through.
Yeah.
A loving Father. He wants us to thrive. He wants us to flourish. Our task is to rest back into his arms, to listen to him, to flow with him. Is it all going to be easy? No, he doesn't promise that at all. In fact, he promises the opposite. That wonderful, that, I'll give you this, and this with persecution. Hey, wait a moment. Where did that word come from? That's not a part of that verse I like. So is it going to be easy? No, it's not. Is he going to cover us and have our back? Absolutely, yes. So we rest back and we walk with him as best we can and trust. 10 years of mine, I was consulting. I left the city in 2008, did 10 years on my own. So then tiny business, no investment bank, no backstop, no salary. I was earning whatever I earned from contracts. But, I would say then I never pitched a business in 10 years. God arranged it, brought it to me. And quickly, there's a church warden in the church near us here who told exactly the same story. He was running his own business. I think it was only 2 or 3 staff, really small. And he was asked if he'd be church warden. And he said, no, I can't be church warden. I simply don't have time. I'm running my own business. I can't do that. And the minister said, well, could you at least pray about it? And he thought, I'm going on holiday, so I can't argue. I don't have time. Yeah, okay, I'll pray about it. And he felt God saying, if you'll take care of my business, I'll take care of your business. So he wrote back to the minister and said, okay, I'll be church warden. He then, I only discovered this the other day, he then took the decision he would not market or promote his business ever again.
Wow.
It's one thing to trust God's going to look after your business, to go down that route and go, okay, God, you've said it. I don't need to do any of that anymore. And he also said for 10 years, never pitched a business. And the turnover, the year he became church warden, the turnover doubled and it stayed up at that level for the next 10 years.
Amazing. And it's that scripture, you honor me and I'll honor you. And you're a testimony to that, Charlie, and what you've done and who you are. And now, obviously, you've retired from the bank, but you're still giving input strategically and investing in others. It's been a real pleasure to meet you. We met initially at an event up in the north of England where we connected together. I know you're also really connected to various people in the city. You've also linked with housing associations, and you were on the Archbishop's Council on Housing and how that worked. So you've continued to serve in the role that God has given you and what he's placed in your hands, which has been amazing. Charlie, any final word that you'd love to say to our listeners? You've given some great little nuggets and insights, but is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion?
I was talking with a young person, quite a few years ago now, who was terrified of taking decisions because she was terrified she was going to go wrong and mess up her life. So I said, tell me, if I guaranteed that in a year's time, whatever mess you've made of wrong decisions, I'll mop it up financially, emotionally, everything else, what would taking decisions feel like? Oh, she said, it'd be a great adventure. So, okay, I can't guarantee that, but we have a heavenly Father who does. So what about if you realize that he is more keen on you getting to your destination than you are? And that actually life is a glorious adventure, listening to the Spirit of God leading you. And if you go wrong, we have a promise. If you'll hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. If you turn to the right or turn to the left, if you go wrong, you'll be led. What if you looked at life as one glorious adventure of getting to know the Father better and watching him work in you, around you, through you, decisions become fun then because it's all an adventure. So I think that's what I would want to say. And courtesy of Jenny pushing me on, and she wouldn't mind me using that word, she then said, you need a sabbatical. Jenny, the city doesn't do sabbaticals. Long story short, a 6-month sabbatical. It's a big adventure. And I got promoted halfway through it. I mean, how does that work? I don't know. It's a big adventure. So what would my advice be? Let's get to know the Father well. God is a good, good Father. He passionately wants us to flourish. Let's walk with him, enjoy the adventure. But we do it also in community with others. That was my mistake at the beginning. I didn't. I thought, Jesus and me, we're good. And actually, that's not biblical. We do it in community. We do it as part of the body. Do it together. Yeah.
Great. Charlie, it's been amazing to talk to you today. And thank you for joining for another episode of Gospel Entrepreneurs. I just love the way Charlie just recognized the Father, recognized where he'd made his mistake, then put those things into place. Obviously, his wife was key to that journey and her faith and following. But isn't it great to know that the Father wants us to go on this adventure? So if you've been listening and thinking, do I go for it? Go for it and see what God does. Been great to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us, Charlie. Really appreciate your time.
So welcome.
This has been a Gospel Entrepreneurs podcast in partnership with UCB, Series 7. And I just thought Charlie and what he brought and his faith and living out his faith in that environment is just what we all need to do. So I pray that you'd had some amazing insights. And thank you for listening. God bless you.